Welcome back to the MHS channel. First, I'm very curious to know where you're watching from and at what time. Feel free to share in the comments below. Also, if you have any feedback or suggestions for how the channel can improve, don't hesitate to leave a comment.
I'm Ethan. I drive deliveries for a Pizza Hut outside Austin, Texas. This job's not my dream or anything, but it pays the rent and covers some bills, so I stick with it and do my best. It was one of those hot summer nights. Even though it was past 10, the air was still heavy, like being stuck in a giant glass box. I'd knocked out most of my deliveries and had just one pizza left for this quiet residential area. The neighborhood's got these big houses and even bigger bushes, so it's peaceful, but kind of lonely. I pulled up my beat-up delivery truck in front of this small house. The porch light threw a yellowish glow on the walkway leading to the door. Holding the hot pizza, I suddenly felt that annoying bladder pressure kicking in. I told myself to hold it, thinking I'd be home soon anyway, but I couldn't hold it. I realized I had to go right then and there. I started looking around, all anxious. The whole neighborhood was dead quiet, not a single person anywhere. For a second, I thought about knocking on the door and asking to use their bathroom, but I shut that idea down fast. No way I was knocking on a customer's door, especially someone who didn't know me. Just thinking about it made my face heat up with embarrassment. So, I went with the quickest, least noticeable option, find a big bush by the house and, well, handle business. I still felt guilty because it was definitely not the right thing to do, but my body wasn't giving me much of a choice. I made my way to the bush, moving fast and keeping an eye out to make sure no one was around. In my head, I kept telling myself it was no big deal and no one would even notice. But deep down, I couldn't shake off the shame. As I crouched down, I silently apologized to the house and whoever lived there, hoping they'd never find out. Just as I got started, I heard this soft sound, like footsteps, and froze. My heart was racing and my mind was spinning. Did someone see me? I held my breath, didn't dare move, and crouched even lower, pressing myself against the bushes to stay hidden. Through the leaves, the dim light from the street lamp lit up a figure. It was a guy in a dark coat, crouching in the bushes right next to me. My heart nearly stopped when I saw he was holding a shiny knife, a big roll of duct tape, and what looked like a bottle of medicine. I froze completely, feeling cold sweat drip down my back, even though it was still crazy hot outside. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then he looked up, and our eyes met. His stare was cold, empty, and calculating. I held my breath, too scared to move an inch. All the guilt I'd been feeling about being rude vanished, replaced by straight-up fear of what this guy might do. For a second, I thought he was going to charge at me, but he didn't. He just stared at me, and that freaked me out even more, the silence, like he was deciding what to do with me. With whatever courage I had left, I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could. My hands were shaking like crazy as I fumbled to grab my phone and call the police. My voice was all over the place as I told them what happened, where I was, and what I saw. I stood next to my car, keeping my eyes glued to the bushes. My legs wouldn't stop shaking and my head was spinning with a million thoughts. Did I just stumble on some criminal? Or was he just some homeless guy with weird stuff? Waiting for the police felt like it took forever. I barely breathed, just watching him sit there, not moving a muscle. When the police finally showed up, they surrounded him and got him restrained real quick. They took all the stuff he had and started checking it out, so what I saw was real. But the craziest part was when they found a photo in his bag. One of the officers pulled it out, and his whole face changed. He didn't waste any time, just headed straight to the house I was about to deliver to and knocked on the door. The woman who answered was my customer, Haley. Haley let out a scream when she saw the guy getting arrested. She told the police he was Tyler, her ex-boyfriend who'd been stalking and harassing her for months. It was pretty obvious that him being there with a knife and duct tape wasn't just a coincidence. Standing there, I felt this low-key panic bubbling up, not just because of the whole awkward thing I'd been doing earlier, but because I'd somehow gotten mixed up in something so terrifying. At the same time, though, I felt a sense of relief that I'd called the police when I did. If I hadn't stopped by that bush, who knows what could have happened to Haley? I didn't even want to think about it. That night, I drove home with my head all over the place. Every time I thought about it, I felt guilty and thankful at the same time, despite an awkward start. Bianca is a young, strong, and independent woman. She lives alone in New York City, one of the most expensive cities in the U.S. Although the cost of living here is very high, there are also many opportunities due to the high population density. Bianca has done many different jobs, from light desk jobs to heavy manual labor ones. Although she is only 24 years old, she has a rather mature appearance. Bianca has an old car, which is her means of daily transportation. If we were to compare her to an animal, she could be an eagle. She possesses strength, resilience, and admirable survival skills. After work, Bianca drove down the familiar alley back home. The dark alley was deserted, and Bianca heard the screams. It was a brown-skinned boy, slender in build, being bullied by two other tall men. He was cornered against the wall, crying out in helplessness. Bianca drove past. She didn't want to get into trouble with those giants. But then she decided to turn back, shining her headlights directly at the three men. The two giants grimaced and continuously cursed at Bianca with explicit language. She rolled down the car window, made a few sarcastic remarks at them, and gestured for the brown-skinned boy to hurry into the car. Fortunately, they understood each other's intentions, and the brown-skinned boy quickly grabbed his backpack and jumped into the car. Bianca turned the wheel and stepped on the gas hard, leaving the two men in frustration. After driving for a while, the boy was finally able to breathe normally. He introduced himself. Bianca found his demeanor friendly, so she greeted him back, but didn't introduce her name. When Bianca asked where he intended to go, he hesitated to answer. Bianca found it a bit strange. She fell silent and with thoughts swirling in her head. The radio in the car was then playing news about a missing person case, and the victim was a young girl. The police were actively investigating, but the criminal's tactics were quite sophisticated. He suddenly reached out to turn off the radio, looked at Bianca, and said, "Listening to these news at night is quite unsettling, isn't it?" Bianca looked at him with suspicion, not saying anything but forcing a very awkward smile. Bianca felt uneasy and a bit regretful for saving this man. She thought of a plan to escape from him. Bianca drove to the nearest gas station, next to which was a small convenience store. Bianca asked him to go into the convenience store to buy her some pain relief medication. Bianca smiled and quickly made up an excuse, saying her head was aching because she had an overwhelming workload that day. He happily stepped out and went into the store. As soon as he was out, Bianca quickly drove off. This man had things that made Bianca feel unsafe. After leaving him, Bianca realized she hadn't had dinner yet. She stopped at a modest eatery, run by a couple in their 60s. Bianca ate while listening to the news about the missing person on the TV. The expression on her face clearly showed concern. The shop owner noticed the girl dining alone and came over to ask her about it. Bianca felt that he was very warm-hearted, but when asked for her name, Bianca only smiled and did not answer. After finishing her meal, Bianca thanked the couple and left, but she paused at the exit in shock. Somehow, he had discovered Bianca's location. He was peering into her car. Bianca felt confused and scared, so she turned to seek help from the couple who owned the eatery. She told them that a pervert was following her. The shop owner grabbed a kitchen knife and went outside. He demanded that the man leave immediately, in 5 minutes, or he would call the police. The man explained that he had left something in Bianca's car and only wanted to come back to retrieve it. However, no one believed the words of a man lurking around a girl's car, especially at such a time of night. The shop owner reacted very strongly and firmly demanded that he leave immediately. He looked at Bianca with angry, helpless eyes and a bit of disappointment before walking away. Bianca thanked the couple again and quickly left. Bianca turned into a deserted alley. Inside the car, Bianca's expression shifted from anxiety to a victorious grin as she looked to the passenger seat. Just as he said, he had indeed left his backpack inside the car. She rummaged through the backpack and found a wallet. There was over $200 and some identification documents. Bianca laughed with delight. In fact, she was a petty thief wandering around the city. Suddenly, a loud crash caused Bianca to startle. She saw the window shattered in one large piece, with a rock lying next to it along with shards of glass. He rushed towards the car in anger, but he realized that the passenger door had already been opened and Bianca had vanished. He stood looking around and yelled loudly for Bianca to return his belongings. He vented his anger on Bianca's old car, continuously smashing it. Suddenly, a loud clatter sounded and the trunk popped open. But the sight inside caused him to freeze immediately from fear. It was the corpse of a girl lying twisted and starting to emit a foul odor. It took several minutes before oxygen could flow into his lungs. He screamed loudly and fled. After running a short distance, he tripped and fell, but then got back up and ran again. Once he reached the main road, he sought help from passers-by to call the police. The corpse in Bianca's trunk was the girl the police had been searching for. The pursuit of Bianca lasted for 10 consecutive days. She was truly very cunning. The unfortunate young girl was one of the victims of Bianca's petty theft. But Bianca had been discovered by that girl. To continue working, Bianca chose to hide that girl away forever. That was the first victim and also the last of Bianca's, because she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
I'm Martin, 33 years old, living in Houston, USA. I have a job with a high income in exchange for a busy work schedule. I've experienced many hotels from budget to luxury, but my hotel experience during a business trip to New York 3 years ago still haunts me. I arrived at the budget hotel at 11 p.m. I didn't have much time to choose a place to stay. The receptionist told me there was only one room left in Area B. There were 2 rooms on that floor. She told me to avoid disturbing the room with the red sign, S1302, next to it, because that was the place the young couple rented for a fixed period of 1 month. I was very tired after a long flight, so I didn't pay attention to that room. I had a 4-day business trip here. The first night went smoothly. I slept very well. The next day, I finished work and returned to the hotel at 8 p.m. After showering and changing into comfortable pajamas, I lay on the bed to relax. Suddenly, giggles rang out in the next room, which was the young couple's room. Then there were moans. They were probably having fun. I put on headphones, turned on the music quite loudly, and fell asleep after that. On the third night, screams and slightly crazy laughter rang out, startling me awake. Looking at the phone clock, it was 12 o'clock. I'm quite uncomfortable because work is stressful all day long, so I really need to get enough sleep. I called the front desk to complain and wanted them to remind the couple to limit such noises. I regret renting a hotel with such poor soundproofing quality. It took 10 minutes for the laughter to stop, and it took me a long time to fall asleep again. The next day I felt tired and went to meet my business partner. The last night I returned to the hotel at 10 p.m. Tomorrow morning I will go home to rest. But this last night was truly more terrible than the previous nights. Because I had drunken a lot of coffee during the day, I have difficulty sleeping. It was nearly 11 o'clock when I heard footsteps running in the hallway. Why are they still making noise when I already responded to the receptionist? I approached the door, intending to directly remind the couple because they were outside anyway. But as soon as I opened the door and walked out, a woman wearing a thin nightgown covering her feet, long black hair hanging down, eyes staring lifelessly. In her hand, she held a sharp, dirty knife straight towards me. I immediately retreated into my room and avoided it. She still maintained that position and ran past. I followed her with my eyes, even though I was very scared. She suddenly stopped, twisted her neck, and made a cracking sound and looked straight back at me. I panicked and quickly locked the door. My whole body trembled. My mind was dizzy and panicked. I was about to call the receptionist when there was a knock on my door. I felt like my heart lost a beat. It took me a few seconds to calm down, but that knocking sound continued. I held my breath, slowly turned around and looked through the peephole. What caught my eye was the image of the woman just standing and staring at the door. The creepy smile on her thin face sent chills down my spine. I didn't know what to do next. Suddenly, a man's loud, angry scream rang out. Then his arm held something and swung it strongly towards the woman. Blood caught on my door, covering the peephole, a dark red color and a fishy smell. I covered my mouth tightly, not daring to scream. I don't remember whether I walked or crawled to the hotel desk phone. I tried my best to put it into words. I asked the receptionist, the security guard, the manager, anyone to come to my room immediately. The hotel manager and staff were present, and nearby tenants ran in panic and gossip. On the floor right in front of my room, a woman lay in a pool of blood. The receptionist confirmed that this is the wife who rented 1302. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and sealed off the scene. The police asked the receptionist to use the spare key to open the door to room 1302. In the room, there was a horrifying scene with blood, syringes, ropes, sharp knives, and a very strong smell. Lying on the sofa was the body of a man with a long cut on his neck, still bleeding, and a knife clutched tightly in his hand. According to police investigation, the man and woman were Jax and Jesse, their husband and wife. The hotel room is a place they rented to satisfy their drug addiction. The hotel receptionist was also bribed by the couple. Days of constant drug use make them mad and lose all self-control. Jax murdered his wife, and then he went back to his room and committed suicide. I asked the hotel to move me to another room and booked my plane ticket for the earliest flight home. I'm Elon. I'm a high school student in Houston, Texas. I'm an open-minded individual and quite enjoy extracurricular activities at school. One time, my class was informed that they would participate in a community service cleanup session at a local park. Even though I wasn't very excited, being able to run outside was better than having to sit and study, I thought. It was Sunday morning. We arrived at the park at 9 o'clock and were assigned areas to clean. This park has just been built in recent weeks, and there are still some areas in the finishing stages. Me, Anna, and Max were assigned to clean up an area with a very large rock. It was high above my head and placed in a small flower garden. I observed the rock and saw that it had a very strange shape. There's also a cross engraved on the stone, but it seems to be upside down. I told Anna and Max, but they didn't pay attention to what I said. I guess I'm no expert in landscaping, I muttered. Ignoring the stone's strange appearance, we started cleaning. Max and Anna pick grass in the flower garden, and I will plant a few new flowers. We do this while chatting about interesting stories at school. As it neared the end, I started to smell a terrible stench. It was really nauseating. Anna and Max also noticed that unpleasant smell. We went around the area we were responsible for to find out the source, but didn't find anything unusual. At the end of the labor session, all of us were told to regroup. My team has thoroughly checked the area we are in charge of, so we are confident that everything is clean. It was probably some dead mice somewhere else, and the wind brought in the stench. We told each other that and happily left. A few days later, we organized a picnic ourselves at the park we cleaned, this time with Ethan and Mary. Returning to the flower garden the other day, we were happy because the newly planted flower trees were lush. My friends and I spread out the carpet next to it, ate together, chatted, and took pictures. About 15 minutes later, it suddenly started to rain. We quickly packed up our things and ran to a nearby shack to shelter from the rain. Where we were standing outside the rock, a brown liquid began flowing out. The stench rose again. This time it was much worse. We were stunned to see that strange thing and looked at each other, confusing and scared. About 20 minutes later, the rain stopped. Me, Max, and Ethan came closer for a better look. Mary and Anna fearfully huddled in the shack. Even though I was scared, a feeling of curiosity was taking over me. Reaching out to brush a few flower plants next to the rock away, a feeling of dizziness immediately hits me. I saw human fingers crushed under the stone and they were decomposing. I screamed out in fear, almost to a panic attack, crawled out to yell at my friends to quickly call the police. The police arrived and immediately searched the scene. Max and I stayed behind to give our statements to the police, while Ethan took Anna and Mary home first because they were so panicked. The police found out that there was a body crushed underneath and immediately sent a tow to move the stone away. Seeing the entire scene unfold, I was shocked to the core by the corpse underneath. The body was no longer in one piece. It was decomposing. The stench and sight was horrifying to witness. The police thanked Max and I for the cooperation, then told us to go home first. Maybe during construction the stone was placed in a different position and collapsed over the poor worker while he was inspecting the project. So my feeling about the stone's strange position is correct. The man's body was processed and returned to his family. That stone was later demolished by the park management board and a flower garden was planted in its place. To this day, that scene still haunts me. Extracurriculars now brings me the dreads. I always imagined that I would discover another terrible thing around there. I'm Louis, 35 years old, living in Los Angeles. My neighbor was a rich couple, Cassie and Joey. Together they're having a 6-year-old son, Jason. Since their work was very busy, I hired a babysitter named Kaylee, who lived within their home and taking care of Jason full-time. The two of them were very close, to the point that Jason often considered Kaylee his second mother. One night, while Kaylee was busy with her secondary work as online translator, there were sounds like the little boy was watching an action movie, totally unsuited for kids. Normally, Kaylee was sure to never let the boy see those shows, yet today, she's too busy with work to notice much. After a while, the boy yelled out in fear, then bursted out crying, claiming to Kaylee there's a monster in the TV. Thinking little of it, she thought it's just a scary scene of the movie. However, she felt guilty for letting the boy see it, so she told the boy to stay calm, then go to bed. Everything would be alright. Jason obediently followed her instruction, telling her goodbye, then went to his room. Kaylee continued with doing her work, then fell into exhaustion soon after. She woke up suddenly sometime later due to the sound on TV being too loud, which was very odd, since she's sure to turn off the TV beforehand. When Kaylee approached the screen, the TV suddenly got static and the shadow of a man suddenly appeared. She fell backward in fear as the man slowly got closer to the screen, mumbling some unintelligible saying. Thinking about Jason, she immediately turned off the TV and went to his room to check on him. Kaylee pushed the door in, only to almost faint at the sight of what she sees. There's a warm liquid pooling all over the room, crimson red, vicious as blood. Jason was lying on the floor, twisted in terror. Blood kept oozing from his mouth. Frightened, Kaylee went all the way downstairs to call the police. Only until after calling the police that she realized that her knees and elbows were all torn open, blood oozing out of the wounds. She couldn't even walk, but had to resort to slipping in order to get down to the first floor. After the coroners went over and performed the autopsy on the little boy, they were unable to determine the cause of death. There wasn't any heavy impacts upon his body, nor any signs of intrusion or any external traces from the outside. Jason's death made Kaylee become the prime suspect. The parents were furious. They swore to make Kaylee pay for her crime. Despite the story of the monster in a man-shaped story, nobody believed her. They all assumed it to be a silly justification for her negligence in true crime. Kaylee was fired on that very day and was ordered to move out of the house on the next day. However, early the following morning, Kaylee went missing, yet the bloody pools around the home were traced to her DNA. Once again, the police hit the dead end. There's no sign of forced entry of violence nor suicidal attempts. The forces that were mobilized on the search for Kaylee went off the cold trails for months without any results. Nobody knew where she was now, even alive or dead. The house of tragedy had since been put up on sale, and the poor couple had long been away elsewhere. Many years had passed. The house was still haunted with bad rumors and now laid abandoned, unkempt at the roadside. The true story about the death of Jason and disappearance of Kaylee remained a mystery. Until it came back for my family, this time. My wife, Santa. We're newlyweds. When I told my wife about the history of the haunted house, in stark contrast to many others, she actually believed in the tales. One day when I'm back from work, Xana was watching near the TV, panicking. When she saw me, she said that there's someone in the TV mumbling something. I quickly took Xana into the bedroom and locked all the doors. She was in fear, shivering when hugging me tightly. Suddenly there came the sound of static and a mumbling of a man. Xana told me that was exactly like the sound of the creature on the TV. I came to the drawer and pulled out a prepared pistol, magazines loaded. I told her to lock the door tight and immediately called the police. She began crying, begging me to stay. She didn't want me to get hurt. Despite my wife's pleading, I held out my weapon, slowly making my way down to the living room. The dwindling lights combining with the static murmur of the man was like a scene from a horror movie. The atmosphere was pretty tense, to the point of it went off at any moment. Coming closer to the light, the mumbling became louder and louder, though I wouldn't understand what the hell he's talking about. It was indeed a male figure in the TV, which was very odd. I remember having turned off the TV and right there, pulled out the plug already. Who the hell was that guy? And what the fuck is going on? I inched closer, squinting my eyes to look at this more carefully. The same man seemed to mimic what I was doing, inching closer, his bloodshot eyes, rough-looking face with a devilish smile, all turned upside down looking at me. I emptied an entire magazine to the TV screen, which made his face disappear as the screen broke into pieces, yet the maniac laughter remained. When the police arrived, they immediately asked me about the current condition. After a brief scan through the scene, they asked me if there's anyone else in the property. I told them that my wife's in the upstairs bedroom and locked the door there. The police came up, asking a lot of time for Xana's response but replied only by silence. Suddenly, a stream of crimson red blood oozed out from the inside, which made me lose all nerves. I bashed against the door with all my might, frantically calling out for her, despite the injuries I'm causing to myself. The police calmly dragged me away and professionally breached through the door. Xana was inside the room, her body twisted and turned. Blood oozed out crazily from her mouth. I hugged her lifeless body in extreme pain and despair. I had fallen into that monster's trap. My biggest regret that would always haunt me was thinking about her final moment when she begged me to stay, then alone facing that monster all by herself. I have many times tried to end my life, haunted by the experience, but I can't. I went deeper into the bottom of all this. I want to bring that fucking monster to the light. I know later that in that very night, many families around me would face similar tragedies where one of their family members was killed in a similar fashion. The same twisted and turned body and the cause of death remaining a mystery. They said hope is a fleeting dream, yet for me, it's the driving force that I am still here. I'm still hoping for one day, Kaylee. The only person who's not sure to be dead by the hands of the monster would return, and may hold the key to answer this question.
Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others, or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood too. You just moved in, right? I confidently greeted her. What is it? Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you, I said, presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. What? Is this the first time we failed? Ryan exclaimed, surprised. Did you smell that really awful odor earlier? I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. Elton, did you see that? Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, We agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. "Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton," Ryan whispered. "I've told you before, she's all but normal," I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, his parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, Countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan. My girlfriend has passed away, but she still frequently messages me. Colleen, my girlfriend, had an accident when her car collided with 2 other vehicles and passed away just minutes later. We've been together for 5 years. I had plans to propose to her just 3 months into our relationship. Colleen, on the other hand, did not have a relaxed view on the topic of marriage. I loved her more than anything, so I went along with Colleen's decision. But I still held on to the hope of changing her mind. Now that's no longer possible. The day I received the tragic news, I felt as if a part of my soul had left with Colleen. I cried, feeling overwhelmed and devastated, constantly missing her. Every day without fail, I would send a good morning message to the one I loved. Good morning, my love. Wishing you a wonderful day. Have a cheerful morning. I love you. No matter what happened, I would always text Colleen first to share it. The project I told you about has succeeded beyond my expectations. I wish you could witness it, Colleen. I have Colleen's personal account password and frequently access it. It gives me the feeling that she's still there, that she can read everything I send. It's just that Colleen doesn't reply to me anymore. I also shared Colleen's social media account with her mother, Aunt Emma. I understand the pain Aunt Emma feels when her only child is taken away so suddenly. 13 months after Colleen left, she sent me her first message. Hello. I felt shocked when I read that message, but a few seconds later, a sense of joy and hope washed over me. It was ridiculous, but I briefly thought that Colleen might still be alive. But then I convinced myself it was Aunt Emma. That was the only logical explanation, or so I thought. A few days later, Aunt Emma confirmed that she was not the one who had messaged me from Colleen's account. What if it was one of her friends? I suggested, another theory, which also seemed quite convincing. Colleen knew a lot of people, and it could have been a prank from one of her tech-savvy friends. Hello. Hello. That was the phrase Colleen used to text me the most, until I finally ran out of patience and replied, This is really crazy. How can you enjoy it? Not only that, Colleen's account started tagging me in posts. This was really exhausting for me. It was both Colleen and not her at the same time. I witnessed my girlfriend's body being brought home from the accident, endured the days of mourning, and my heart shattered as her coffin was lowered. But now, she's messaging me. There were times when I was truly convinced it was Colleen, because the words she used matched exactly what we had planned together. And the most horrifying, insane thing happened. I received a photo of myself taken from the window while I was sitting at my computer desk. It was sent from Colleen. I felt a wave of nausea and struggled to breathe. What the hell is happening? I shared this story on Reddit, hoping to find some connection or support because I felt so lost. The story above is based on a true event. A user named Nathan, with the Reddit handle NateSW, shared the story of his girlfriend of 5 years. Nathan's story garnered significant attention, and many people offered various theories to explain the strange events he described. One theory suggested that it might be the girlfriend's mother, who, out of grief and longing for her daughter, sent those messages to Nathan in an attempt to comfort him. Others speculated that Nathan might have been sending the messages to himself, either consciously or unconsciously, as a way to cope with his loss. It's possible that he was so consumed by grief and loss that his actions sometimes lacked clarity. Absolutely, Regardless of the theories, it's the ones left behind who bear the deepest pain and longing. Their grief is a heavy burden that doesn't easily fade. Indeed, memories can bring joy, but also evoke difficult-to-forget pain. They are like a part of life, both beautiful and full of challenges. Beautiful memories can kill the soul if we don't find a way to break free and seek out new, joyful experiences.
I lost my job and life got pretty tough and flipped upside down. By 29, I should have a steady job instead of sitting around at home, eating fast food to get by, watching all kinds of TV shows and whining about life. All that went on for almost a month, and I looked pretty pathetic. The last bit of luck I had was my girlfriend, Karen. I suggested moving in with Karen. Karen thought it over and finally nodded, agreeing. She pushed me to cheer up and get started on a new job. When I moved in, Karen was chill about it. The place wasn't too big or modern, but it was perfect for the two of us and her little dog. The only thing Karen seriously told me was, definitely don't go down to the basement, like ever. I was a bit confused, but agreed quickly. After all, it was her place. The basement was the spot I hated most in any house. But can I ask you something about what's down there? Kinda hesitated. A garden, Karen shot back quick and sure of herself. Oh, that's awesome. I said it out loud, but honestly, I was thinking something totally different. A garden in the basement? Maybe Karen was growing plants for some side hustle or something. That made total sense. She definitely needed more than what she was making as a teacher. The furniture in Karen's place wasn't cheap either. She must have really cared about her lifestyle. But making extra cash from growing plants didn't really sound doable, especially in the basement. Come on, Bill. If you were so good at thinking things through and doing the math, you wouldn't be wasting your time like this. I shook off those crazy thoughts and just focused on what was real. The next few days were pretty chill and normal for us. The only thing was, my girlfriend was totally obsessed with watering the plants, and she did it like clockwork at 9 p.m. One time while we were chatting, Karen jumped up like a spring, all panicked, and yelled, "What time is it? I totally forgot about my plants." Karen, plants don't need that much water. I was kind of annoyed by how extra she was. But my plants do. She shot me a look, stressed each word, and then walked off. I waited for Karen in the living room. She always spent about an hour in the garden. I was curious about how big the garden actually was. I quickly apologized when I saw Karen coming up. She was all happy again, and we made up. The next morning, I got the electricity bill from the power company, and Karen wasn't home at the time. I didn't rush to open the bill. I figured I'd pay it, but I also wanted to chip in a bit for my girlfriend. Just then, Karen came home and asked, "Is that the electricity bill?" "Yeah, Karen, I'll pay the bill," I said while she was opening it to check it out. $600? Karen happily nodded and mumbled to herself. "What?" I gasped in shock. $600? I repeated and grabbed the bill from Karen's hand. "Not too bad, less than last month." Karen was pretty happy and nodded. I was shocked. Less than last month? That garden down there is using up that much electricity? So I just decided to stay quiet. $600 was way too much for an unemployed guy like me. One day, Karen went on a school field trip, and that's when I learned everything. That day, her dog went missing, and I was worried about finding it. Standing in front of the stairs to the basement, I felt a little curious for a second. I remembered what Karen told me, and I was worried she'd find out, but there was no way she could know. I opened the door and walked in, and the lights surprised me. It was super bright and kind of blinding. I slowly opened my eyes to check it out, and it was totally a garden. They were really pretty, all green and smelling awesome like fresh grass. Especially the grapevine in the middle of the basement, with its long, spreading leaves, kind of like a tree spirit representing the soul of the forest. I got closer, and the grapevine suddenly shook and wiggled. Is there some kind of wind system? I wondered. Looking at the grapevine up close, it was huge, about as wide as an adult's back, and it was breathing heavily. As I looked closer, I saw the face of a miserable dude, and his rotting, ulcerated body seemed to blend right into the vine. I freaked out and ran away, packed all my stuff and took off. I even smashed my phone like a total idiot when I saw Karen calling. I'm still in a panic, and I don't want to call the police because I still love and appreciate Karen. What am I gonna do now?
I'm Mandy, a 37-year-old single mother with a 5-year-old daughter. My sister is Julia, and she has a baby boy who is just 3 months old. This painful story happened 6 years ago, and it caused my sister to undergo psychological treatment for a whole year afterward. In the winter of 2018, on a Thursday, I received a call from my sister, inviting me to dinner and then to do some shopping for Carrie, her son. The itinerary for that evening was as follows. I picked up Julia. We were going to pick up Carrie. Then we stopped by the laundromat because I had a few items to pick up, went to dinner, and finally went shopping. I drove with my daughter to pick up Julia at her office, and then we headed to pick up Carrie. This time, we weren't picking up Carrie from the babysitter's house. She arranged for us to meet at a McDonald's on the street, where she was having dinner with her boyfriend. I stayed in the car while Julia went inside the restaurant to pick up her son. They chatted for a while, quite happily, and the babysitter even leaned down to blow a kiss and say goodbye to the little boy. We left after about 10 minutes at McDonald's and continued on to the laundromat. My daughter was very excited to meet her little brother. She immediately rushed to the portable crib where Carrie was. "Be gentle, sweetheart. Your little brother is fast asleep," I warned my daughter. She nodded in agreement, just sitting there, watching her brother, while Julia and I exchanged happy smiles. At the laundromat, Julia placed Carrie on the table, and I told my daughter to keep an eye on her brother. About 10 minutes later, my daughter suddenly burst into tears. I rushed over, knelt down in front of her, and kept asking what was wrong. She was crying and pointing at Carrie's crib, leaving Julia and me very confused. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked my daughter patiently and gently. "Dead, dead." The two words my daughter uttered left my sister and me in shock. I immediately checked on Carrie. He was wearing a snug, full-body outfit with a high zipper. The babysitter must have dressed him before taking him outside. Carrie's lips were tightly closed and turned purple. He wasn't breathing anymore. Julia panicked and pushed me away. She began performing CPR on her son. My daughter's cries only added to the chaos and panic of the situation. I picked up my daughter and called the police. "We're at the laundromat at 923 on 3rd Street. Or Merrill Street. I'm not sure. Please come here immediately. My nephew has stopped breathing." As soon as she heard me calling the police, Julia started crying while she continued to perform CPR on Carrie. Panicked, in pain, scared, desperate, mixed with a glimmer of hope. That's everything Julia had to endure all at once. I understood that feeling of a mother. Julia's crying grew louder, and her hand movements slowed, and she eventually collapsed. I set my daughter down and rushed to continue the CPR on Carrie. At that moment, I felt like I couldn't be strong anymore. The little boy's body was cold. About 10 minutes later, the police and the ambulance arrived at the same time. According to the autopsy, Carrie suffered a severe head injury from a blunt object. and his pelvis was fractured and dislocated. It's horrifying for a child just 3 months old to have to endure such pain. The first person the police would definitely interrogate was Carrie's babysitter. Her name is Tabby, a 28-year-old babysitter who is 5 months pregnant. That unusual woman pretended to cry for Carrie when she was being interrogated by the police. She kept crying and then laughing, claiming that she had no idea Carrie had passed away. The surveillance footage from the McDonald's showed Tabby and her boyfriend having dinner, and she carried Carrie's crib with an incredibly indifferent attitude. But in reality, the little boy had already passed away. What she was carrying was just a cold corpse. Tabby had a history of child abuse and neglect, and Julia was filled with regret and deep sorrow for not having researched properly before entrusting her son to a villain. This story is based on a true event that occurred on the evening of October 18th, 2018 in Wausau, Wisconsin, USA. A mother discovered that her 2-month-old son had passed away shortly after picking him up from the babysitter. The case was quickly clarified because the babysitter was the prime suspect and the perpetrator. She displayed a very unstable mental state, showing irresponsibility and a cold-blooded attitude toward a small, innocent life. This story serves as a lesson for young mothers about the importance of being careful and thorough in choosing a safe child care location.
My cousin, Skylar, passed away when she was just 10 years old. On the day of the funeral, my aunt wailed in grief and despair. Skylar was an only child, the one my aunt considered her entire source of life, who had left so suddenly and painfully. Skylar fell nearly 20 stairs. When discovered, she was lying in a pool of her own blood, with her head broken at a 90-degree angle. The sweet, innocent little girl with that warm, radiant smile was taken by God too soon. But how can one judge the work of the Almighty? Those were the words my uncle, Skylar's father, spoke at his daughter's funeral. He was shockingly calm, or perhaps that was the limit of suffering a strong man had to endure. The casket was open so that those who knew and loved Skylar in life could come and see her one last time. I supported my aunt as we took slow, heavy steps toward her daughter's side. I had taken care of Skylar since she was very little. Mourning her loss felt immense, but my heart ached even more for my aunt, who had to endure such overwhelming pain. Standing there looking at my cousin's lovely face, suddenly, her eyes shot wide open for a moment. I flinched, stumbled back, and fell to the ground. Looking around, the faces of anguish and the sounds of weeping made my head spin. A strong grip from a sturdy hand helped me to my feet. It was my uncle. He looked at me, still with that calm gaze, and said, "This will be our secret." I don't understand what he's saying, what is going on. I started to feel suspicious, paying more attention to him, and having thoughts that gave me chills multiple times. "Sheila," my aunt called me, extending her weak arm. She needed me because she could no longer stand on her own. I quickly grabbed my aunt's hand, trying to finish the funeral. 2 days after Skylar's funeral, my aunt asked me to come to the house to help her clean up Skylar's belongings, and of course, I agreed. My aunt was still tired and resting in her room, so I didn't disturb her. Stepping into Skylar's room, I stood still, silently observing everything around for a few minutes before starting to clean up. I was quite curious why everything was so messy, when Skylar had always been pretty tidy. When I got to Skylar's desk, I sat down to look at her drawings. The first was a drawing of a close-knit family of 3, and it was easy to guess that Skylar was drawing her own family. But the expressions of the parents in the drawing were not very cheerful. Next was another family drawing, but the father and mother were arguing very intensely, while the daughter sat curled up in a corner, crying in fear. The final drawing depicted a girl who had fallen down the stairs, her neck twisted to one side. The mother knelt beside her daughter crying, while the father stood on the highest step of the staircase, looking down with an expressionless gaze. "This will be our secret, okay?" The voice of the uncle startled me, causing me to jump up. I pressed myself against the wall to keep my distance from the cruel person in front of me. "Why did you do that?" I looked at my uncle with an angry gaze, but my body was trembling uncontrollably. He didn't answer, lowering his head and clenching his fists tightly. I immediately ran away, before becoming the next victim. Driving home, I cried a lot, feeling angry, scared, and desperate. Stopping the car in front of the house, I suddenly remembered that my aunt was still in the house of the evil one. I immediately called the police while turning the car back to my aunt's house. My aunt's terrified screams echoed as I hadn't even got out of the car yet. Grabbing the pepper spray, I rushed into the house. The scene in front of me left me and the police officers who arrived shortly after in shock. My aunt was kneeling on the floor, right next to the staircase, her body soaked in red liquid, holding tightly onto a red knife instead of the original gray one. My aunt was screaming wildly along with terrifying curses. Next to my aunt was my uncle, lying motionless, his neck bent at a 90-degree angle, with countless stab wounds on his body. He's no different from his terrible and brutal father. Every time I see it, I will be reminded of him and go insane. Now it's over. The two of them will be together forever. My aunt burst into laughter at the trial, then hugged her daughter's ashes and fainted. A family that seemed perfect was shattered by a violent, unfaithful, and selfish husband, leading to an unerasable hatred in the wife's heart. Every year, I visit my aunt in prison and visit the graves of my uncle and Skylar on important occasions. Even now, I still can't enter into a marriage, despite being 36 years old. One time I told my wife she didn't have much time left. The reason I've got such wild jokes is partly because my wife, she's got a fun, upbeat, and kind of pervy personality. My mom passed away from a serious illness, and at the funeral, my wife pulled off this crazy stunt using ventriloquism from a course she took. "Help me, let me out." She copied my mom's voice and said it just as they were about to lower the coffin. My dad and I were stunned, and the funeral guests, some freaked out and ran, others straight up fainted from fear. Meanwhile, my wife was laughing and cracking jokes at her mother-in-law's funeral. Last time I got home from work, I hadn't even gotten out of the car before I was yanked into the house. My wife pushed me down on the couch, and with tears in her eyes, she said the lottery ticket we bought at the convenience store yesterday hit the jackpot. I have no idea why I totally believed my wife back then without even questioning it. I agreed to buy her all the brand name stuff she wanted with the cash I'd been hiding for ages. Even crazier, I called my boss and told him I was quitting and gonna buy the company. After I said that, my wife cracked up and nearly spit out all the orange juice she had in her mouth. I was shocked to see that I'd totally been played. I had to totally grovel to my boss, saying I drank way too much that day, which is why I was acting all wild. Honestly, that trick hurt like hell, and I've always thought about getting back at her somehow. A few days later, my wife's health took a nosedive out of nowhere. I could see how worn out she was, dealing with worse and worse stomach pain. She was not the cheerful and lively wife I knew anymore, and I really missed her. I took my wife to the doctor, and they said we'd get the results in 3 to 5 days. Those were some really tough days for my wife and me. I took some time off and spent all my days with my wife, doing all the stuff we'd been planning for ages. Some nights I cried holding her. We were planning to have a baby by the end of the year, but my wife totally saw those worries too. "Chris, I'll be fine, or else I won't leave you hanging." I hugged my wife and cried like a kid without even realizing it. But that was just the start of the door to the first level of hell. 3 days after my wife went to the hospital, I got a call on my phone. It was the doctor. "Hello, Mr. Wilson. I'm calling to update you on your wife's condition. Can you hand the phone to her? I've tried reaching her a few times but couldn't get through." I begged the doctor to talk to me. I couldn't wait any longer and didn't want my wife to hear the results, good or bad, before I did. "You and your wife just keep enjoying your happy family life." So my wife was good, and I was just in tears. At that moment, my wife walked in, saw how I was acting, and got pretty worried and nervous. "That was the doctor, right? Why didn't you call me? Am I fine?" In a split second, it hit me to get back at them by bringing up my wife's life and death. "You don't have much time left. We don't have much time. I'm sorry." Going all out, I cried and hugged my wife, making my face look as painful as I could. But my wife didn't cry. She was totally emotionless. She pushed me away and went to the kitchen, and I kinda zoned out for a sec before following her. When I got there, she had a bottle of wine and 2 glasses ready on the dining table. "Let's grab a drink and chat for a bit." I thought to myself that I had to stick it out in this role of my life until the end, and then I woke up all tied up, standing against the wall. "What are you doing?" I freaked out when I saw my wife sitting with her back to me. She turned around right away, still looking emotionless, but she had a rifle in her hand. She stood at the end of the room, aimed right at me, and loaded the gun. I swear I almost wet my pants, like for real. "Maddie, honey, I'm not cool with this kind of joke." "Honey, there's no way I'm leaving before you. The thought of you living on and maybe marrying someone else is driving me nuts." "Maddie, please, I was just messing around. It was all a joke. I'm sorry. The doc said you're fine," I yelled when I saw my wife's finger on the trigger. God, I've known and been married to her for almost 10 years, and I never knew she had such dark thoughts. She put the gun down, thought for a few seconds, then tucked it back in that wooden box. The box I've always thought was just for decoration. I was panting, my heart racing like crazy, and sweat was pouring down. Then my phone rang, and this time my wife picked it up. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Wilson. I made some mistakes about your wife's results earlier." I am in my 3rd year of college. Living and studying alone in this busy city isn't easy, and I only get some help with tuition from my family. That night, I was walking home from my part-time job. I stopped by the ATM to grab some cash since I only had $10 left. I left out a sigh when I saw my account balance on the screen. I was about to pay rent and tuition at the same time, a problem I knew all too well and had dealt with before, but it was still tough for me. Thinking about it for a few minutes, I went ahead and hit the button to take out $100. After waiting a bit and still not seeing the cash come out, I looked up at the screen. "Before you get your money, we're doing a customer survey, and you could win $10,000 for doing it. Do you want to take part?" I was pretty surprised. This had got to be a new feature since ATMs are usually just for taking out cash. It didn't take me long to hit agree. $10,000 was a huge deal for me back then. There were 8 questions total, and I just had to say yes or no. Wow, making money has never been this easy, I said with a grin. First question, have you had any weird dreams lately? I frowned when I saw the question. It wasn't just a basic info survey like age or gender. Why do banks even do surveys like this? I thought about it and hit the no button on the screen. The loading icon spun for about a second before question number 2 popped up. Do you want to have a dream like that right now? I didn't think twice and just hit the no button right away. Don't turn back till you finish the survey. The red text kept flashing on the screen. I squinted a bit and took a couple steps back. I unexpectedly ran into someone and jumped, instinctively trying to turn back, but that flashing red text stopped me right in my tracks. I stared at it like I was trying to remind myself, not sure why I decided to believe it back then. I could hear clothes rustling, the steady breathing of the person behind me, and those heavy footsteps. It was the first time someone else was using this ATM at the same time as me. I glanced at the shadow of the person behind me, and he looked kind of chubby, but I wasn't sure. Are you dreaming? The next question popped up. Definitely not. Even though I was worn out from a long day at work, my mind was still pretty clear. Right after I hit the answer, the person behind me suddenly moved in closer. Feeling a bit uncomfortable and awkward, I scooted closer to the ATM, but it didn't help because the person just stepped closer to me. Are you sure? I was starting to regret doing these dumb surveys, but my $100 was still stuck in there. Right away, I caught this really fishy and gross smell. I felt warm, kind of damp breath on the back of my neck. The person was standing way too close, and the stench was definitely coming from them. Without thinking, I lifted my hand to cover my nose. It was almost too much for me to handle. Hey, could you back up and give me some space? I said firmly, but it didn't do a thing. Don't turn back until you finish the survey. I had to keep telling myself that to make my actions make sense. My hand was shaking and felt heavy. It took a lot of effort to press the yes button on the screen. Thanks for finishing the survey. Right after that, the $100 bill popped out. I was still shaking as I grabbed the bill and slowly turned around. There was nobody there. I swear my feeling was legit, super real. But I couldn't figure out how that person showed up and then just vanished. I stuffed the bill in my pocket and bolted out of there with everything I had. It felt like I was running away from my own fear, and there was nothing pushing me. When I got home, I crashed and fell asleep around 3 a.m. The next day, I asked my friends if they had seen that survey while getting cash, and they all said no. I looked online, and there were no other stories like that. I shoved that awful memory aside and ended up getting totally obsessed with all ATMs. I hit up the bank to take out some cash since I was broke. When the receptionist said my account balance was up to $10,000, my brain felt like it was going to explode. I asked her about that bank survey at the ATM, and she just looked confused. I asked the receptionist to check the transaction history, and no account had sent me that cash. Did it just pop up out of nowhere? Or did I have that money and not even know it? I walked out with a $10,000 balance and had no clue what to do next. I kept logging back in over and over, staring at the screen and counting every single number on my account balance. I really have $10,000. If this was a dream, that ATM totally gave me a weird dream, just like that first survey questions. Mommy, can a child live in a trash can? That was an innocent question from my son, but it haunted me ever since I learned the story of a monstrous mother. I am a single mother living with my 5-year-old son in a small neighborhood. Everyone here is very friendly, except for the house right next to mine. I found out that the owner of that house is also a single mother named Hebe, with 5 young children, 4 daughters and a youngest son, who is the same age as my son. She was described by the neighbors as someone with a selfish lifestyle. I met her a few times, but my greetings were ignored and met with a very cold attitude. Several times, loud arguments could be heard coming from Hebe's house at night between her and another man. I guessed that he was the father of one of her 5 children, as they did not resemble each other. One day, I was busy preparing dinner in the kitchen and left my son to play alone in the living room. A moment later, the boy ran over and hugged my leg, saying, "Mommy." I replied to my son while still focusing on cooking, "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Mom, can a child live in a trash can?" My son's innocent question made me laugh. If there are a lot of ugly bacteria, why would you want to live in there? I don't want to, but the boy next door does. Then you should advise your friend not to do that. I brushed off my son's question and quickly finished making dinner. After dinner, I worked while my son watched TV. When I glanced at my son, I was a bit surprised to see him watching images of trash cans. "Honey, what are you watching?" The boy didn't respond. His face was very pensive, and his eyes were fixed on the TV screen. "Are you trying to learn about something?" Being inside there must be really cramped, and there are no candles, toys, or even a TV, Mom. My son's voice was very sad. "Who are you talking about?" "It is about the friend from next door." "There's no way that would happen, Mikey. Every baby deserves to be loved." I smiled, knowing my little boy had grown and had the sensitivity of a 5-year-old. I took my son to his room, kissed him goodnight, and then returned to my own room. I didn't go to sleep right away. I finished up some work first. About 10 minutes later, my son cried out loudly in a panic. I didn't have time to react before the boy opened the door, ran to me, and hugged me tightly while crying a lot. "Mom, please save him. He'll be hungry in the trash can." I look at my son in shock. I didn't rush to ask my son questions. Instead, I comforted him first. Once my son calmed down, he recounted everything that had happened. From losing his ball in the neighbor's backyard, he had planned to run in quickly and come back since no one was around. "I picked up a plastic bottle in the yard and threw it in the trash can, just as you told me. I saw him in the trash can." Hearing my son's story left me in shock and made me shudder. I immediately called the police because I was sure my son wasn't lying. From the information I gathered, the police had to visit Hebe's house 3 times before uncovering the horrifying truth. She denied having a son, constantly crying and pretending to be pitiful. In the shed in Hebe's backyard, the police found a trash can containing the body of her youngest son. Hebe took advantage of her sad circumstances to register for government assistance using her son's information. Hebe's children were very unfortunate as they received no care or attention from their own mother. Her youngest son died from a high fever that led to seizures and brain damage. After learning of her son's death, she didn't obtain a death certificate or bury him properly, and she didn't seem to grieve at all. Her selfishness and greed were even more disgusting as he'd continued to use her son's information to receive monthly benefits. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but her cold-bloodedness and insensitivity deserved to be locked up forever. It was heartbreaking for the little boy. That innocent soul deserved protection and love instead of being abandoned like that. How could a mother not love her own child? Did she really deserve to be called mom by her 5 children? This story is based on a true event that occurred in Rock Island, Illinois on July 25th, 2023. The police received the tip-off from a neighbor who claimed that the woman next door was hiding the long-dead body of her son in her home. It took a long time for the police to uncover the truth about a selfish, irresponsible mother and her unfortunate little boy.
I'm Daria, 21 years old, living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My family is middle class and I have 4 siblings. After graduating from high school, I went to work to help my parents and my siblings. I chose babysitting because it didn't require any degree. After several years of working in my hometown, I came to New York. I wanted to increase my income by working for rich families. I went to Manhattan, New York, where the world's largest concentration of billionaires and millionaires is located. I was hired to babysit for a family who lived in a house that looked like a castle in a fairy tale. I am responsible for taking care of 3 children. Baron, 10 years old, Savia, 8 years old, and Aiden, 6 years old. The 3 children were perfect. They are very polite and obedient. Baron, Savia, and Aiden are not the same. Each child will resemble their father in some way. As far as I know, the boss is a businessman, 44 years old. He will be home on odd days of the week. I also never saw his wife. Surely such rich families will have complicated stories like those in the movies. Nothing would come of it until the last few weeks. I received a call to my family's landline. The children are about to be in trouble. Save them quickly. A man's voice, very deep and a bit frightened. I asked who he was, but the other end of the line kept repeating the same sentence. The children are about to be in trouble. Save them quickly. I felt uncomfortable and hung up. I think it's a prankster from someone having a mental problem. The next day, still in the same time frame, I received another call. The girl is in danger. Save her quickly. I was startled to realize that this voice was the man from yesterday. Who are you? What is your relationship with this family? I quickly asked him. But he repeated what he had just said and hung up. The girl is in danger. I fell into confusion. Save her quickly. What is up? The boss's powerful and slightly annoyed voice rang out right behind me. He must have heard something while I was talking on the phone. I hastily told him about the 2 calls from the man. He immediately got angry and asked the workers in the house to unplug all phone lines. I suggested calling the police, but he immediately got angry and shouted loudly. He asked me to take good care of the children and not to do anything else without permission. Everything went normal until 5 days later. I went up to Savia's room at 6 o'clock to call her down for dinner. Knocking on the door for a long time, Savia didn't want to open the door. I opened the door and went in. I looked around the room and couldn't find her. The iPad was playing the movie Savia was watching. I called out, but she didn't answer. Running downstairs in a panic, I quickly told the housekeeper to quickly call the boss. Savia was missing. But the strange thing was that everyone present in the dining room was indifferent to what I said. They continued to eat their meal very calmly. Even Baron and Aiden did not react when they heard their sister was missing. I froze looking at these people. Don't they have any emotions? I decided to call the boss myself, but he didn't answer the phone. I really wanted to call the police, but remembered his angry reaction the day before. I had to put the phone away. I'll wait until the evening when he comes home. Today is also Thursday. As soon as I heard the sound of his car, I quickly ran to tell the boss about Savia's disappearance. But his reaction once again shocked me. She misbehaved. She will be punished and come back in a few days. I'll say it again, just mind your own business. His cold and bloodshot eyes looked straight at me. It made my body stiffen. His eyes gradually turned back to brown. I panicked, tried to hold my breath, bowed my head, and ran quickly back into my room. I'm scared, but I'm making a lot of money working here, so I choose to stay quiet and try to do my job well. 3 days later, Baron continued to disappear. The boy disappeared, leaving the room cluttered with many things. I was extremely panicked when incomprehensible things continued to happen. But the attitude of the people living in this house really makes me feel creepy. A housekeeper, she came in at the same time as me, revealed to me the reason why Baron disappeared. The boy was also taken to be punished because he refused to take medicine. Medicine? Is Baron sick? I didn't know about this when I joined the job. A series of questions appeared in my mind. It's been almost 2 weeks. Baron and Sabia still haven't come back. One day, I went down to the warehouse to find Baron his favorite ball. I was a bit startled when I saw the desk phone stored in here. I stood looking at the phones for a while and decided to go over and plug in the red phone I'd received 2 calls before. As soon as I plugged in the phone, it immediately rang loudly, causing me to panic and answer the call. I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. My heart was beating very hard. I tried to breathe evenly. On the other end of the line was that man's voice. "Quickly, get out of there. You will be the next victim." I didn't answer. I tried to calmly continue to listen. "You'll be forced to drink deadly drugs. You will lose all consciousness and emotions. You'll become a living doll. He will sell you as a sex toy." My eyes widened as wide as possible. Tears welled up. I covered my mouth tightly, trying not to sob out loud. He was so cruel that he used his own children to make money. Maybe his wife was sold in that way. Not just 1, but 3 wives, with 3 children. All I could think about right now was running away. I had to escape this horrible place. Just as I turned around to run out, at the warehouse's entrance, a tall black shadow was staring at me with cold, bloodshot eyes.
I'm Dean. I'd got a wife and 2 young kids, a girl and a boy. We all lived happily in the peaceful, beautiful town of Tyringham, Massachusetts. We both agreed on limiting electronic devices when it came to raising our kids. We'd spend time playing and chatting with our kids. My favorite family game when we had free time was hide and seek. Looking for someone in a familiar space is exciting. It's also a bit thrilling and unpredictable. Usually we hid, and then the kids did the searching. I usually picked spots where I was pretty visible, like sticking out my arms or feet to give the kids a hint. Once they found me, I joined the kids in searching for my wife. Unlike me, Iris picked the most unexpected hiding spots. In the same space, she hid in the most unexpected places, under the sofa, in the kitchen cabinet, you name it. Every time we found her, the kids burst into laughter, and it made us really happy. But eventually, the game started to get a bit boring. The kids lost patience if they had to search for too long. My daughter even got upset and cried if she couldn't find us. So we decided to switch up the game a bit. 1 person hid, and the other 3 searched. I definitely knew where Iris is hiding, but I wouldn't give it away right away. "I think I saw Mom hiding behind the kitchen cabinet," I told the kids, all excited. The kids giggled and dashed off to find their mom, but she was actually behind the shelf in the living room. To keep things interesting, we decided to stretch the game a bit for more suspense. One Saturday evening, after we all finished dinner, my son Terry said he wanted to play hide and seek, and everyone was totally on board. We decided that Iris would hide, and the rest of us would go looking for her. 1, 2, 3, 7, 10, 100. My daughter's sweet and not so serious counting made me and my wife crack up. We all heard my wife's joyful laughter, and I figured it was coming from the kitchen. "Hey kids, let's check the living room for Mom first." They immediately ran off calling for their mom. I just stood there, feeling the kind of happiness any dad feels watching their kids have a blast. Emma quickly turned around and said Mom wasn't there, and Terry always echoed her. "Okay, then you two check the bathroom." "Mom, don't change your hiding spot," Emma said loudly, grabbed their little brother's hand, and they both ran into the bathroom. "Dad, I still can't find Mom," my son ran back and said. I smiled and pointed to the kitchen. The kids got it, covered their mouths, laughed happily, and tiptoed over to the kitchen. I showed them where I knew my wife was hiding. "Gotcha!" The kids shouted with joy. I watched them and laughed out loud, but after a few seconds, their happy faces fell. She wasn't there. She must have sneaked off and changed her hiding spot. My wife could be so sneaky. I smiled and used a teasing voice to lift the kids' spirits again. "Little detectives, go check the bedroom for Mom. I'm sure she's there. Hurry up, you two." The kids went along, but they weren't as excited anymore. I followed the kids upstairs and pushed the door open. We were all surprised when we didn't see my wife. At this point, the kids officially gave up on the game. They ran back to the living room and grabbed their toys to play. I walked around the house calling out for her. "Honey, we've lost. Just come out." My wife was more stubborn than I'd thought. She'd hidden in all sorts of tricky spots, but I still managed to find her. Did she find a new hiding spot? "Honey, the kids aren't playing anymore. Come out." Then I heard a door bang in the basement. This time I was sure my wife was down there. I headed down the stairs to the basement. The dim light was even creepier than the darkness. I called her name loudly, but there was still no response. At this point, I started losing my patience. "Iris, it's not fun anymore. The kids and I aren't into the game anymore. You should come out. It's almost bedtime for them." All I got in response was silence, the gloom, and a bit of the musty smell of the basement. The light bulb kept flickering and then went out, leaving me swallowed by darkness. Not able to see anything, I stood still for a few seconds and called out for Iris again. I was really scared of not being able to figure out where I was. "Iris, please!" I heard a rattling sound of light, so I called out for my wife quickly, feeling a bit annoyed. "I'm heading upstairs. I'm done with this game." I turned around and walked straight ahead, groping in front of me to find the stairs. Something brushed past my hand, and I quickly pulled it back and froze. I called out for Iris, but this time with a slightly louder, more annoyed voice. As I turned back toward the basement, I saw something flash past me. I was sure it wasn't Iris. She's less than 5 feet tall. The person I saw had to be over 7 feet tall. I ran as fast as I could, with urgency and panic taking over. If I could just reach the steps, I could find my way up to the house. I tripped and fell, my whole body tumbling down the stairs, with the impact making me feel like my insides were screaming. I got up and crawled out of the basement. I rushed to the living room to find my kids. "Emma! Terry!" I screamed. "What's wrong, honey?" Iris and the kids looked at me blankly. Turns out, my wife was just sitting in the living room playing with them. "Where have you been?" "I was hiding outside the house. You didn't expect that, did you?" I immediately pulled my wife and the kids into the room, leaving them all confused. I locked the door, told Iris what had happened, and called the police. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. They searched the basement and the whole house, but found nothing unusual. I called someone to demolish the basement, even though Iris wasn't happy about it, and changed all the locks in the house. I still can't explain what I saw that day, but the feeling I got when someone brushed past my hand still makes me shiver. I just wanted to make sure my wife and kids were as safe as possible. I'm Francis, 28. I have a girlfriend who's 26. We live and work in Houston, and we've been together for almost 3 years. After wrapping up a big project that took 6 months, I planned a 7-day vacation for my girlfriend. I picked Chicago as our destination since it's where my girlfriend was born and grew up until she was 10. She remembers a lot from when she was little and shares those memories with me often. Chicago is a beautiful city and definitely worth experiencing. I booked a flight and a hotel, and we meant to spend a really meaningful and happy week together. No words can depict her happiness and excitement. She told me about how Chicago has changed compared to 16 years ago. It was really meaningful and interesting for her to recall her childhood while experiencing the city again. On the evening of our 4th day in Chicago, we decided to take a double-decker bus tour to see the city after dinner. Chicago at night was absolutely amazing, and the weather that day was perfect. The bus was pretty empty that day. We sat in the back row. A girl was in the middle row, and another couple sat up in front. I liked how sparse it was. It made everything feel more private. I gave my girlfriend a necklace with the first letters of our names engraved on it. We shared a quick kiss and laughed together. I jumped when something really hot touched my foot. I looked down and saw a baby bottle. I figured it must have belonged to the girl sitting in the middle row. I walked up to the girl and said, "You dropped the baby's bottle." The girl was startled, turned around, took the bottle from me, and said thank you. I really love kids and have told my girlfriend many times that I'm ready to become a father. I sat in the empty chair opposite the mother and daughter to watch the baby for a bit. I asked, "Is that a boy?" because I noticed the blue clothes and the thin blanket. The girl smiled and replied, "Yes, his name is Jonathan." But when she pulled down the thin blanket, I was startled to see that it was a doll. My smile instantly turned awkward. "Do you think my son is cute?" I nodded and quickly went back to my seat. My girlfriend asked me curiously what happened. "I think that girl lost her mind." I told her what I saw, and at first, she thought maybe I just saw it wrong because it was dark. I wasn't sure either, since I was confused and didn't get a good look at the baby in the girl's arms. We decided to just ignore it and continued enjoying the city. About 10 minutes later, while we were sitting in the front row chatting and laughing with the couple, suddenly, the girl's sad singing voice echoed through the bus, and it was heartbreaking and painful to hear. The couple turned to look at the girl and then glanced at us with uncomfortable expressions. We were just as confused, and I couldn't help but get goosebumps. The wind, which had been really cool, made me shiver. Remembering the movies we had watched, the mother who had lost her child and was so sad and had lost her memory, thinking that the dolls were her children, it was really similar to what was happening now. My girlfriend walked over to the girl. I couldn't hear clearly what they were saying. I just saw my girlfriend's smile turn into confusion before she quickly returned to her seat. My girlfriend told me she noticed the girl's shirt and the towel around the baby seemed quite wet. The girl must have just given birth recently, and the wet shirt and towel were from milk flowing out. But she was holding a doll, not a real child. We looked at each other with concern. My girlfriend suggested we get off at the next stop and end the bus tour there. I agreed. From that moment on, we all kept an eye on the girl, and so did the other couple. Suddenly, the girl stood up, walked to the center of the seats, and shouted, "This is my son Jonathan. I just bought him this afternoon." As she spoke, she smiled, but it looked more like the smile of a lunatic than the happy smile of a mother. The next moment, the girl was crying again, hugging the doll tightly to her chest. My previous son couldn't be used anymore. He kept crying a lot, all day long. The other 4 people on the bus were all frozen, and we didn't know how to react. Suddenly, a baby's cry really rang out. The girl immediately stopped crying and went into a total panic. Could it be that the cry was coming from the doll? The girl hurriedly searched for something. The baby's cry seemed to trigger her nerves. After a while of searching, she threw the doll aside and rushed to the bag at the seat where she had been sitting. From the large bag, the girl pulled out a child. This had to be the real Jonathan she'd just mentioned. The girl hugged the little child to her chest and tried to comfort him. The child kept crying, and the young mother, feeling helpless, cried along with him. I quickly pulled out my phone and called the police, reporting the situation and what was happening. The bus had just stopped at the next stop, and the couple hurriedly ran away. I ran to inform the driver, while my girlfriend stayed behind to comfort the mother and the child. On the lower floor of the bus, I quickly summarized everything to the driver. Suddenly, my girlfriend screamed loudly in a panic. A small blue object, making the sound of a baby crying, passed through the window of the bus on the first floor. I was stunned for a few seconds. The crying stopped, and then there was another loud scream. A small dismembered body was lying on the road. The driver and I panicked and rushed up to the second floor of the bus. I ran to where my girlfriend was kneeling and crying on the ground. She hugged me tightly, her body shaking and her hands cold. The other girl was holding a doll and singing a lullaby happily. The police arrived, sealed off the scene, immediately helped take the girl to a treatment facility, and asked everyone involved to go to the station to cooperate with the investigation. It took a while for my girlfriend to calm down and describe the horrific and heartbreaking scene. That girl was Louisa, a mother who had just had a baby boy a little over 3 months ago. Louisa was suffering from postpartum depression and psychosis because she wasn't getting the care she needed. Her husband had been having an affair since Louisa was 6 months pregnant. Louisa had been mentally tortured by her husband and his lover for a long time. How much endurance, despair, and fatigue would it take for someone to act like that towards their own child? Louisa's husband and his lover need to be held accountable and face appropriate punishment. Louisa is getting treatment, but I can't imagine how painful it will be for her when she finally realizes what happened. I'm sure Louisa isn't the only one going through this. There are a lot of young mothers out there under pressure, having to care for their children all on their own. Children and women always need to be cared for, supported, and protected in all circumstances. I'm Dante, 45 years old. I'm the sheriff of the Phoenix Police Department, Arizona. As a sheriff, I have undergone and dealt with every kind of case. Only the case of the abandoned house on the city's outskirts keeps haunting me and my colleagues. That was the winter of 18 years ago, in the evening when I was an investigator officer on the night shift. At midnight, there was a call at the department. I picked up the phone in a rush. That was the dispatcher. With a rather confused and urgent voice, he told me about the phone call he had had. A man with a calm tone called them. I just choked a few people, and now they aren't breathing. Then, suddenly, he laughed as if he were crazy. Number 13, McDowell Street. The man stated the address and then quickly hung up. My 2 colleagues and I immediately headed over to the address as we knew. When we got there, We saw it was a big house in a rich neighborhood. The house was dark and quiet. We knocked a bunch of times, but nobody answered or opened the door. In the end, we had to break a window so David, our smallest officer, could climb in and unlock the door from the inside. As soon as we got inside, our flashlight stopped working, even though it was fine just a few seconds ago. We felt an intensive smell like fish in the air. On the floor, there was a sticky liquid. After fumbling around for a bit, we finally found the light switch. When the lights came on, we saw a horrifying scene. A layer of dark red blood was on the floor, spreading and soaking into the expensive fur carpet. We searched the whole house but didn't find any unusual signs or the odor. According to the investigation, this house belongs to a wealthy couple named Thomas and Daria. They have 2 kids together. After examination, they concluded that the blood on the floor was enough for 5 or 6 adults. However, Mr. Thomas's family has 4 people and 2 young children. The neighbors around insisted that this fancy house had been empty for about a month. Our team worked for 3 months and still didn't find any clues or bodies. We couldn't track down the location of the person who called the police that evening. The case eventually hit a dead end, but my colleagues and I didn't give up. The Thomas family's house was sealed off for further investigation. A month later, the police got a call saying the door of the house had been opened. We also got a lot of reports from the neighbors saying they heard occasional laughter coming from the house. The investigation team showed up right away. When we walked into the house, we all heard kids laughing. Following the laughter, we went upstairs and found a glowing toy car. One of my colleagues said he must have just seen that car on the first floor. We all just stood there, looking at each other with confused and suspicious expressions. The house still doesn't show any other unusual signs. One evening, the police got a report that some kids coming home from school saw light on the 2nd floor of house number 13. This time, we confirmed that someone was still living in the house. We armed, just in case. When we entered the house, we quickly checked the 1st floor and then headed up to the 2nd floor. Suddenly, all the lights on the 2nd floor turned on, and it startled us. At that moment, David seemed like he was in a trance. He sprinted toward the stairs and jumped down, surprising everyone. As soon as David landed, the gun in his hand went off with a loud bang. My remaining teammates and I looked at each other, totally shocked. When he got to David, he was lying face down in a big pool of blood with a gaping hole in his head. David's sudden and bizarre death left me and the rest of the team in shock. Rumors about house number 13 on McDowell Street started spreading everywhere. The house was even more tightly sealed off. A few months later, when the investigation had stalled, neighbors told us a strange man was living in the abandoned house. When we arrested him, that guy kept insisting he had Mr. Thomas's permission to move in. So Mr. Thomas isn't dead after all. The investigation team has reopened the case about his family. The guy living there was named Leon. He said he was a longtime friend of Thomas. But when we asked him about Mr. Thomas's family, Leon said that Thomas and his wife had divorced a long time ago and that he was now single. We started to have doubts about what this guy was telling us. After carefully searching the whole house again, we found a big wooden box buried deep in the basement. Inside the wooden box were the mostly decomposed bodies of a woman and 2 small children. After examination, it was confirmed that the bodies were Mr. Thomas's wife and 2 kids. We showed Leon the photo to see if he could identify Mr. Thomas, the so-called longtime friend. He said that he had many similar features to his friend, but his features were much more youthful. He pointed out that his friend Thomas had a big mole at the end of his left eyebrow, but this guy didn't have that. I looked up Thomas's family records and found out that his dad and grandpa were also named Thomas. The case of the house at 13 McDowell Street turned into a confusing mess and became a murder that shocked the whole country at the time. That guy named Leon hanged himself in house number 13 just 3 days later. All investigation work on the case has been on hold to this day. The members of our investigation team that year still remember our unlucky teammate David and hope that one day they'll find clues to solve the case.
My name's Glenda, 27 years old. I'm a journalist currently residing in Nevada. I'm an introvert and reserved individual who dedicated everything to my job. I did not have a lot of friends as well, and felt a great deal of anxiety talking to people due to me being an albino. I did not have any experience with romance. To be fair, I never thought that there would be a single person in the world wanting a relationship with me. Things turned upside down the moment I met Jim. He's a strong, tall, perfect man, super friendly too. Jim was an already established person with a great family to back it up, enough to hit me up at first sight. I, of course, thought that he was totally out of my reach and not even dreamed of him glancing at me. But he made the first move indeed. A lot of attack from a love-struck Jim from me on the get-go. Flowers, expensive gifts kept showering me from Jim. He always tried to find ways to see me, spending time with me. Yet when he expressed his feeling after 1 week, I declined. Don't get me wrong, I really, really liked him, yet this quick of a pace worried me that he would lose interest as quickly. But Jim was very persistent, for over 6 months, and I finally agreed. When I saw Jim's happiness, I almost cried myself. Finally, I could feel what love was. Jim was very caring. He looked after me in almost every aspect, especially my well-being. One afternoon, when I ended my shift early, I was about to arrive to Jim's workplace to surprise him. The door was unlocked, so I could easily sneak in. Seeing his familiar silhouette, I felt so happy. My heart started pounding within my chest. Jim had no idea I was right behind him. The mark this time was great, Mom. I felt it's an opportune time for us to continue with your experiments. I'll introduce to the family maybe on the next weekend. I happened to listen to his family conversation. It seemed like there's some family business. Yet the cold and emotionless voice, I never heard from him before. I was so much in my thoughts that I stood there for a long time. Until Jim turned around. He was startled and confused with me being there. He immediately demanded to know why I was here and what I had heard. That attitude was really annoying to me. But after my explanation, he was much more relaxed and hugged me tight. Afterward, we're having dinner together. After dinner, we were watching TV when Jim held my hand, saying that he wanted to show me his family the next weekend. I gave him the wide eyes and was unable to say any words. Jim was rather restless with my nonverbal answer. He repeated one more time his request. Do your parents know that I'm an albino? I've told them everything, Glenn. They're so eager to see you. I was pretty nervous, yet Jim seemed to notice that, and he just shrugged it off. He was certain that his parents had no problem with that and would like me like he did. His persuasive tone, combining with my adoration for him, melted me away, and I agreed on his proposal. I followed Jim to his home, a small town a few hours away from the main city. Everything here was strange and rather isolated. His parents had been waiting for my arrival. His mother came over hugging me like she'd known me forever, while his father stood afar smiling. They introduced themselves as Orla and Ven. Yet even before I was able to introduce myself, they had bombarded me with questions. Those questions weren't about my information, but focused mainly on my health conditions. I was a bit confused at first, yet Jim told me that his parents knew all about me already. Their main concern now was about my health. With this revelation, I gradually warmed up to their questions. During mealtime, Jim's parents asked me about lights and the supernatural. They kept looking at me, then eyeing each other with some mysterious gestures. I was surprised seeing that the house parlor was a young girl, and mostly surprisingly, an albino. Not stopping there, The chauffeur for his family would also be an albino. I tried to talk to them, yet their actions were very odd. While the house parlor always smirked her creepy smile, the chauffeur was pretty distant. Both of them never said any word ever since I showed up. Our itinerary was scheduled for 10 days at Jim's household. At night, while Jim was soundly asleep on his familiar bed, I was really hard to sleep, so I decided to venture downstairs for some water. As soon as I closed the fridge, Jim's mother had already been there behind me. She was really amused at my frantic state. When I asked her why she hadn't slept yet, she asked me if I had seen any odd things here in her household. The strange question froze me while Orla burst out laughing. Orla gave me a glass of water and said it would be good for my sleep. Orla stood watching me, finish all the water, and left. When I returned to my bedroom, Jim was nowhere to be found. I walked around the room, looking at the toys and pictures of Jim when he's little. I stumbled across a red box hidden deep behind the bookshelf, and curious, I picked it up to see. Inside it was a rather large pile of pictures. Scouring through the pictures, my emotions shifted from surprise to suspicion. That was Jim's picture with his exes. They were really happy, and most surprisingly, all of his exes were albinos like me. And one among them was even a man. So Jim was a bisexual. The most shocking among those were the fact that his house parlor and chauffeur were his exes. What's the meaning of this? I suddenly recalled the conversation between Jim and Orla over the phone. He's talking about taking someone home to see their family on the weekend. So that's me. Suddenly, a white shadow slipped through the window and startled me, prompting me to hold my mouth so not to make any noise. I took a deep breath, mustered all my courage to get near the window, and looked out. It turned out to be the chauffeur, and he acted very odd, running over and over in the backyard. I wanted to see what he was going to do next, but my body fell into exhaustion. I couldn't remember what happened next. When I woke up, I found myself sitting at the dining table, everyone in the family enjoying breakfast and laughing together. Jim gently smiled at me and pulled me a dish of food. The house parlor came over to me with a glass of water. She smiled at me too, but her teary eyes made it the most haunting smile I had ever seen. I got a feeling that she too was trying to suppress her emotions. I glanced over the glass of water. It was similar to the glass Orla gave me yesterday. I suddenly recalled the conversations between Jim and Orla over the phone. There was mention about some kind of experiment. I have to get out of here. I tried my best to get up and scream out loud. When I came back to my senses, I was back in Jim's room. To be sure where I was, I bit my hands and felt the pain. Taking the scissors with me, I rushed out of Jim's house, trying to run so fast with all my strength. By the time my body was weakened and the feeling of drowsiness reappeared, I held my breath, gritted my teeth, and twisted the scissor point into my hand to stay awake. The shearing pain washed over me, kept me awake in tears. I did not want to be another live experiment. I kept running and stabbing myself with the scissors for like 5 times until I was able to stop a truck. The driver was so panicked, looking at an albino covered in blood. Yet luckily, I was able to tell him my story, and he was able to call for help. Continuously drifted in and out of consciousness. It took me 3 times to finally calm myself down, knowing that I was in safety. I told the police everything I had been through. Jim and his entire family was arrested, with strong evidence found in the house's basement. They had spent years kidnapping the albinos and used them as slaves, with a crazy belief that the albinos had supernatural properties. They wanted to keep those people around their household to guard against the evils of the unseen world. I was lucky to be alive and escape from this household. If I hadn't discovered their schemes early, would I be just another live experiment of those crazy people?